When everything around you becomes chaotic, most people lose clarity. They rush, they react, they make decisions in the middle of the storm without waiting for the storm to provide the conditions for good decisions, which it never will. The chaos does not calm down so that you can think clearly. The chaos is the permanent condition. The question has never been whether the chaos will stop. The question has always been whether you have built the specific discipline that allows you to think clearly while it continues. Most people are waiting for things to settle before they apply the full quality of their attention. Waiting for the pressure to reduce before they make the decision. Waiting for the noise to stop before they listen to what matters. The waiting is the problem. The conditions for clear thinking that the waiting is waiting for are not coming. They have never come consistently, and they will not start. There are people who do something different. They slow down when the environment is pressing toward speed. They observe when the situation is demanding reaction. They see clearly in the conditions that have clouded everyone else's vision. Not because their circumstances are less chaotic, because they have built the specific discipline that this audiobook develops. 10 chapters, each one a layer of the architecture that produces the calm mind in the chaotic conditions. By the end, the chaos that currently degrades your thinking will still be present because the chaos is the permanent condition. But your relationship to it will be specifically and fundamentally different, because you will have built what separates the person who is controlled by the chaos from the person who thinks clearly through it. Introduction. The chaos you cannot remove. The first discipline of the calm mind is the accurate understanding of what calm actually is. Calm is not the absence of chaos. The absence of chaos is simply comfort, the condition of the person who has arranged their life around avoiding the situations that would produce it. Comfort does not produce the disciplined calm that this audiobook builds. It produces the fragile peace of the person who has never been tested, which is not peace at all. It is the temporary quiet that will shatter the moment the unavoidable difficulty arrives. Calm is the maintained quality of thinking in the presence of chaos. It is the specific cognitive discipline of clear observation, deliberate assessment, and governed response applied precisely in the conditions that are specifically designed to prevent these things. The discipline is real, it is built, and it begins with the understanding in Chapter 1 that the chaos is not the problem to be solved. It is the permanent condition to be navigated. Chapter 1. Chaos is the default state. Life does not become calmer, you must become calmer. The most consequential misunderstanding about chaos is the belief that it is an interruption. The belief that the normal state of life is order, predictability, and manageable complexity, and that chaos is the intrusion, the temporary disruption of the normal that will eventually subside and return the situation to the baseline of manageable calm. This misunderstanding is costly because of the specific waiting pattern it produces. The person who understands chaos as the interruption is waiting for it to end before applying the full quality of their cognitive resources to the situation. They are managing through the disruption, surviving until the normal returns, making the minimum necessary decisions until the conditions improve. The conditions do not improve. The chaos is not the interruption of the normal. The chaos is the normal. And the person who has understood this, who has made the genuine cognitive shift from waiting for calm to building it, has made the single most important adjustment available in the development of the disciplined mind. Why chaos is unavoidable is not a philosophical position. It is the accurate description of the structure of a genuinely engaged life. The genuinely engaged life is the life organized around things that matter: meaningful work, significant relationships, ambitious goals, genuine investment in outcomes that are not certain. Each of these is a source of the specific type of complexity that the word chaos is pointing at. The meaningful work produces the unexpected difficulty, the technical challenge, the deadline that arrives in the wrong conditions. The significant relationship produces the misalignment, the conflict, the demand for the quality of engagement that the comfortable and manageable moment does not require. The ambitious goal produces the gap between the current state and the required state that the pursuit of the goal continuously reveals. Each element of the genuinely engaged life is a continuous source of the complexity that produces the specific cognitive demands of the chaotic condition. External versus internal instability is the most practically important distinction that this chapter makes. The external chaos, the demanding environment, the difficult people, the unexpected events, the genuinely complex circumstances is real and cannot be eliminated through any amount of mental discipline. The internal instability, the cognitive and emotional degradation that the external chaos produces in the person who has not built the discipline to manage it, is the specific target of this audiobook. The external chaos continues. The internal instability is what the discipline addresses. The person who has built the discipline does not experience the external chaos as the cognitive emergency that it appears to be for the person who has not. Not because the external circumstances are less complex or less demanding. Because the internal state, the quality of the thinking, the governed emotional response, the maintained attentional focus is no longer primarily determined by the external state. The internal state is governed from within. The external chaos cannot find the lever that would move it, because the internal governance is specifically built to withstand the specific pressures that the chaotic environment applies. Why waiting for calm never works is the specific practical implication of this foundational understanding. The wait is indefinite. The calm that will be produced by the external environment subsiding is not coming on any reliable schedule. And organizing the quality of cognitive engagement around the arrival of that condition is organizing the quality of thinking around the expectation of something that the structure of the engaged life does not reliably provide. The alternative is the development of the internal discipline that makes the quality of thinking available regardless of the external conditions. That development is what every chapter of this audiobook builds toward. Chapter 2. Why your mind collapses in chaos. Chaos does not break the situation, it breaks the thinking. The specific mechanism through which chaos degrades cognitive quality is not the direct damage that the chaos itself does to the thinking. It is the specific neurological and cognitive changes that the stress response to the chaotic conditions produces, changes that reduce the quality of the cognitive functioning even before any decision has been made or any action has been taken. Overload and cognitive shutdown begin with the specific physiological changes of the stress response, the cortisol flooding of the working memory that reduces its capacity for the complex reasoning that the chaotic situation most requires. The attentional narrowing that compresses the broad field of observation down to the most immediately threatening dimension of the situation. And the suppression of the prefrontal executive functioning that maintains the deliberate, considered quality of the thinking. Each of these changes is individually significant in the reduction of cognitive quality. Together, they produce the specific condition in which the person who is capable of nuanced, multivariable, consequence-aware thinking is temporarily capable of significantly less at precisely the moment when the chaotic situation most requires the full quality of their thinking. Emotional flooding is the second mechanism of the cognitive collapse in chaos, the specific condition in which the emotional system's activation has risen to the level where it is consuming the attentional and regulatory resource that the deliberate cognitive processing requires. The emotional activation is not the problem in itself. Appropriate emotional engagement with the genuinely significant aspects of the situation provides the motivational force that drives the engagement. The flooding is the problem, the point where the emotional activation has exceeded the level that productive engagement with the situation warrants, and has become the primary driver of the cognitive processing rather than the informational input to it. In the flooded state, the thinking is not primarily about the situation. It is about the emotional state that the situation has produced. The cognitive resources are occupied by the management of the emotional intensity rather than by the assessment of the actual features of the situation and the generation of the considered response. The decisions that emerge from this cognitive state are calibrated to the emotional experience rather than to the actual requirements. They serve the urgency of the flooding rather than the genuine needs of this situation. Loss of decision clarity is the third mechanism and the most practically costly in most ordinary chaotic situations. The decision clarity that the calm mind maintains the specific quality of seeing the range of available options clearly, evaluating their likely consequences accurately, and selecting the most appropriate one deliberately is specifically degraded by each of the preceding mechanisms. The working memory reduction limits the number of options that can be simultaneously held and compared. The attentional narrowing limits the completeness of the situational picture from which the options are being generated. The prefrontal suppression limits the quality of the consequence evaluation. The emotional flooding biases the selection toward the urgency-consistent option rather than the best option. The result is the decision that feels urgent and necessary in the moment and registers as the poor decision in the hours and days that follow. Understanding these mechanisms with the precision that makes the management of them specific rather than general is the cognitive foundation for everything the subsequent chapters build. The discipline practices are not willpower applied to the general problem of handling chaos better. They are the specific interventions at the specific mechanisms that the chaos is disrupting. Each chapter addresses a specific layer of the disruption, and each chapter's practices produce the specific restoration of the cognitive quality that the disruption was degrading. Chapter 3. The discipline of slowing down. Slowing down is strength, not weakness. The discipline of slowing down in chaotic conditions is counterintuitive in a specific and practically important way. The chaotic environment generates the specific experience of urgency, the felt sense that speed is what the situation requires. That the decision must be made now, that the action must be taken immediately. That delay will produce a cost that exceeds the benefit of the additional time the slowing would provide. This urgency experience is real. It is also, in the overwhelming majority of ordinary chaotic situations, significantly overstated relative to the actual temporal requirements of the situation. Breaking urgency is the first practice of the slowing down discipline, the deliberate examination of the genuine temporal requirements of the current decision or action. Separate from the urgency experience that the chaotic conditions are generating. The examination is brief and specific. What actually happens if this decision is delayed by 10 minutes? By an hour? The honest answer, in most situations that generate the urgency experience, is that the cost of the brief delay is far smaller than the cost of the degraded decision quality that the urgency-driven immediate response produces. The genuine emergencies, the situations where the cost of delay is actually immediate and irreversible, are rare. The manufactured urgency of the ordinary chaotic situation is common. Mental pacing is the second practice, the deliberate governance of the speed of the cognitive processing rather than the automatic adoption of the pace that the chaotic environment is imposing. The chaotic environment imposes a fast pace, the rapid sequence of incoming demands, the compressed decision timelines, the social pressure toward the immediate response. The disciplined mind does not automatically accept the imposed pace. It assesses the genuine requirements and adopts the pace that the genuine requirements warrant, which is typically slower than the environmental imposition suggests. The specific practice of mental pacing is the deliberate physical slowing that was developed in the Staying Calm Under Stress chapter of the Never Lose Your Composure audiobook, the reduced movement pace. The slower speech rate, the deliberate physical settling that changes the body's signals to the brain from urgency to regulation. These physical pacing signals are not charismatic. They are direct physiological interventions that affect the body's operating state and, through it, the quality of the cognitive functioning available for the situation. Observing before reacting is the third practice of the slowing down discipline, the deliberate withholding of the behavioral response until the observation of the situation has been completed sufficiently to inform a genuine response rather than the automatic reactive output. The chaotic environment consistently produces the pull toward the premature response. The situation seems to demand the immediate engagement. The social dynamics seem to require the immediate reply. The emotional activation seems to require the immediate expression. The slowing down discipline is the specific resistance to each of these pulls, the maintained observation period that allows the fuller picture of the situation to become available before the response is committed. The accumulated effect of the slowing down practice across many chaotic situations is the progressive development of the regulated pace as the default operating mode in challenging conditions. The early applications of the discipline are effortful, the urgency experience is strong, and the slowing feels like the active resistance to the situation's demands. The later applications are less effortful as the neural infrastructure of the regulated pace builds through consistent practice. The eventual expression of the discipline is the natural adoption of the deliberate pace in the situations that would previously have produced the automatic urgency, the automatic slowing that is the expression of the trained mind rather than the effortful override of the untrained one. Chapter 4. Controlling Attention and Noise. Who controls attention controls thinking. The attentional control practice is the most directly practical cognitive discipline available in the chaotic environment. Because attention is the primary cognitive resource through which everything else operates. The quality of the observation, the quality of the thinking, the quality of the decision, all of these are entirely dependent on the quality and direction of the attention that is being brought to them. The chaotic environment is specifically structured to fragment, redirect, and capture the attention in ways that serve the chaos rather than the person navigating it. Focus under chaos is the specific capacity of maintaining the attentional direction on the genuinely important elements of the situation rather than on the most urgency-generating or most emotionally compelling elements. The urgency-generating elements and the emotionally compelling elements are not necessarily the most important ones. The chaotic environment produces a continuous stream of inputs calibrated to capture the attention through urgency, through emotional charge, through social pressure regardless of their genuine importance to the situation's actual requirements. The attentional control practice begins with the deliberate identification of the genuinely important elements, the few specific things that actually matter for the situation's requirements before the engagement with the full chaos. This prior identification is the specific practice that keeps the attentional resource from being captured by the most compelling element of the chaos rather than directed at the most important one. The identification does not need to be elaborate. The brief, specific determination of what actually matters here, what specifically requires the full cognitive resource, is the practice that keeps the attention governed rather than captured. Filtering input is the second practice, the deliberate management of the information that is admitted to the cognitive processing and the information that is recognized as noise and deliberately excluded. The chaotic environment produces an overwhelming volume of information, only a fraction of which is relevant to the genuine requirements of the situation. The undisciplined mind attempts to process all of it, the relevant and the irrelevant simultaneously, which degrades the processing quality of the relevant through the resource consumption of the irrelevant. The disciplined mind filters the relevant information, receives the full processing quality. The irrelevant is recognized and set aside without the full processing that would consume the resource. Ignoring distractions is the third and most continuously demanded practice of the attentional control discipline. The chaotic environment produces continuous distraction, the competing demand, the unexpected development, the social interruption, the internal distraction of the anxiety and the rumination that the chaotic conditions naturally generate. Each distraction is a bid for the attentional resource. Each bid must be assessed: is this a genuine priority that warrants the redirection of the attention? Or is this a distraction that warrants the brief acknowledgement and the deliberate return to the previous focus? The practice of ignoring distractions is not the suppression of awareness, it is the deliberate assessment of each distraction's genuine priority and the deliberate choice of whether to redirect or return. This assessment does not need to be elaborate. The practiced attentional control makes the assessment rapid: genuine priority or distraction. The returning of attention to the genuine priority after the assessment has determined that the distraction does not warrant the full redirection is the specific training act that builds the attentional control capacity. Each return is a repetition. Each repetition builds the infrastructure. The infrastructure is the focused, governed attention that the disciplined mind maintains in the chaotic conditions. Chapter 5. Emotional stability as a tool. Emotions are not the enemy. Uncontrolled emotions are. The emotional stability that the disciplined mind maintains in chaotic conditions is not the absence of emotional experience. It is the specific capacity to use the emotional experience as information, as the genuine signal about what matters, what is at stake, What deserves the attentional and cognitive investment without allowing the emotional experience to become the governor of the thinking and the behavior? The emotion is the input. The governed mind is the processor. The deliberate response is the output. The stability is the maintained quality of this sequence under the conditions that most consistently disrupt it. Emotional regulation in the chaos context is the specific practice of maintaining the emotional experience within the range that supports rather than degrades the cognitive functioning. The range is not the flat, affect-free state of the suppressed emotional life. It is the functional range, the level of emotional engagement that provides the motivation and the information that genuine investment produces, without exceeding the level at which the emotional activation begins to consume the cognitive resources that the situation requires. The specific regulation practices are the ones developed throughout this series: the physiological regulation that addresses the emotional activation at the neurological substrate, the breath that reduces the cortisol flooding, the physical settling that reduces the urgency signals, the awareness practice that keeps the emotional state visible rather than the invisible driver of the thinking and the behavior, the naming practice that converts the undifferentiated activation into the specific, labeled, managed emotional experience. Each of these practices serves the same function in the chaos context: the maintenance of the emotional experience within the functional range rather than the overflow into the territory where it degrades the quality of everything else. Staying grounded in the chaos context is the specific quality of the emotionally stable person, the maintained connection to the deliberate assessment and the genuine values that keeps the thinking and the behavior anchored to the actual requirements of the situation rather than to the emotional weather that the chaotic conditions are generating. The grounded person in the chaotic situation is the person who knows what they are there for, what actually matters, and what the genuine requirements of the situation are, and whose behavior is consistently expressing these rather than the varying emotional state that the chaos is producing around them. Internal control is the outcome that the emotional stability practices produce in the chaos context, the specific quality of the person whose internal state is primarily determined by their own values and their own deliberate assessment rather than by the chaotic external conditions. The external conditions continue to be chaotic. The internal state is governed from within. The quality of the thinking, the quality of the observation, and the quality of the decisions are all maintained at the level that the internal governance allows rather than degraded to the level that the external chaos would otherwise impose. Chapter 6. Clear Thinking Under Pressure. Clarity is a skill, not a state. Clear thinking under pressure is not the occasional achievement of the fortunate moment when the conditions happen to be right. It is the deliberate, practiced, progressively more reliable expression of the specific cognitive discipline that keeps the thinking clear regardless of the conditions. The clarity is a skill. Skills are built through the consistent application of the specific practices that build them. And the clarity skill is built through the consistent application of the thinking frameworks, decision clarity practices, and mental fog prevention disciplines that this chapter develops. Thinking frameworks are the specific cognitive structures that the disciplined mind applies to the chaotic situation to produce the clarity that the undisciplined mind cannot access. The framework is not an elaborate analytical system that takes extended time and full cognitive resource to apply. It is the brief, specific set of organizing questions that keeps the thinking pointed at the genuinely important elements of the situation rather than at the most salient or most urgent ones. The most practically useful thinking framework in the pressure context is the three-question sequence: what is actually happening here? Stripped of the emotional amplification and the catastrophized narrative, what specifically does this situation require of me right now? And what is the most useful single action available within my scope of influence in this moment? These three questions, applied in sequence, produce the specific clarity that the pressure situation is most consistently preventing. They strip the amplification, they identify the genuine requirement, and they direct the cognitive resource toward the actionable rather than the overwhelming. Decision clarity is the specific cognitive quality that the thinking framework support the clear picture of the available options, their likely consequences, and the criterion for selecting among them. In the chaotic conditions, the decision clarity is most commonly degraded not by the lack of information, but by the excess of emotionally amplified interpretation of the information. The actual facts of the situation are manageable. The activated emotional system's version of the facts is the catastrophe that produces the decision paralysis or the impulsive urgency-driven choice. The thinking framework's function is the decamplification, the return from the catastrophized version to the actual features. Avoiding mental fog is the third element, the specific practice of preventing the accumulation of the unresolved thoughts, unaddressed concerns, and unprocessed decisions that produce the diffuse cognitive impairment of the mental fog. The mental fog is not the dramatic cognitive shutdown of the full overload. It is the gradual degradation of the cognitive quality through the accumulated weight of the things that are present in the working memory without being resolved or deliberately set aside. The mental fog prevention practice is the consistent processing and resolution of the cognitive load, the addressed decision, the processed concern, the deliberately deferred consideration that keeps the cognitive workspace clear for the genuine current requirements. Chapter 7. Decision-making without panic. Panic makes decisions worse, not faster. The panic-driven decision is not the fast decision that the urgency demands, it is the degraded decision that the panic produces. The speed of the decision in the panic context is not an asset. It is the symptom of the cognitive degradation that the panic has caused, the attentional narrowing that has reduced the option set to the most urgency-consistent one, the working memory flooding that has prevented the consequence evaluation, the emotional bias that has calibrated the selection to the feeling rather than the genuine requirement. The panic makes the decision fast. The speed is not what the decision needed. Slowing decisions in the panic context is the specific practice of maintaining the deliberate decision process in the conditions where the panic is pressing toward the immediate, urgency-driven commitment. The deliberate process does not require the extended deliberation that the comfortable conditions would allow. The panic context compresses the available time for a genuine reason, and the deliberation must be proportionate to the genuine temporal constraint. But it does require the minimum viable pause that the three-question thinking framework can complete. The minimum viable option assessment that considers more than one alternative, and the minimum viable consequence evaluation that looks one step beyond the immediate. Evaluating options in the panic context is the specific practice of resisting the option foreclosure that the urgency produces. The urgency of the panic context narrows the perceived option set to the most immediately salient response, the one that the activated state is already oriented toward, the one that addresses the most urgency-generating element of the situation, the one that provides the fastest resolution of the discomfort that the urgency is generating. The option evaluation practice is the brief, deliberate check. Is there an alternative? What does the alternative produce one step into the future? The check does not always change the decision. It reliably improves it. Avoiding emotional choices is the third practice, the specific discipline of recognizing the decisions that are being produced by the emotional state rather than by the genuine assessment of the situation's requirements, and of withholding the commitment to those decisions until the emotional activation has reduced to the level where the deliberate assessment can genuinely govern the selection. The identifying marker of the emotional choice in the panic context is the specific quality of the urgency it carries. The emotion is pressing toward the decision now, before the evaluation is complete, because the evaluation might produce a different decision than the one the emotion is already committed to. Chapter 8. Building Mental Order. Order in the mind matters more than order around you. The mental order that the disciplined mind builds is not the reflection of the ordered external environment. It is the specifically developed internal cognitive structure that maintains the quality of the thinking regardless of how ordered or disordered the external environment is. The external order is pleasant and supports the thinking where it is available. The internal order is the specific target of this audiobook because it is the one that is available in the chaotic conditions where the external order is not. Structured thinking is the first dimension of the mental order, the cognitive discipline of organizing the thinking around the specific structure of the situation rather than allowing it to be organized by the most salient or most urgent elements that the chaos is producing. The structured thinking applies the thinking frameworks developed in Chapter 6 consistently, even when the chaotic conditions are pressing toward the reactive, unstructured response. The structure is the governance. The governance is the mental order that the chaos cannot disrupt. Internal systems are the second dimension, the specific cognitive routines that keep the mental workspace organized across the ongoing chaotic demands. The internal system is not an elaborate external organizational structure. It is the specific cognitive habit of the beginning of engagement review. What actually matters here? The decision capture, what has been decided and what remains. The deliberate deferral, what is not actionable now and can be consciously set aside without consuming the cognitive resource. And the end of engagement assessment, what has been accomplished and what is the next genuine priority. These brief, consistent cognitive routines are the internal systems that maintain the mental order across the continuous demands of the chaotic environment. Mental clarity habits are the third dimension, the specific daily practices that maintain the cognitive workspace at the quality level that the chaotic demands require. The daily reflection that processes the accumulated decisions and concerns before they become the mental fog described in Chapter 6. The deliberate recovery periods that restore the cognitive resource depleted by the chaotic demands. The deliberate preparation at the beginning of the demanding period that sets the attentional direction before the chaos captures it. These habits are not elaborate. They are brief, consistent, and the cumulative effect of their consistent application is the maintained mental order that the person without them cannot access in the genuinely demanding conditions. Chapter 9. Practicing calm daily. Calm is built in the quiet moments. The calm that holds in the genuinely chaotic situations is not built in those situations. It is built in the ordinary, low-cultivation moments of the ordinary daily life through the consistent practice of the regulation, the attentional discipline, the structured thinking, and the deliberate slowing that the preceding chapters have described. The ordinary moments are the training sessions. The chaotic situations are where the training is tested. And the person who has not built the calm through the consistent practice of the ordinary moments is the person who discovers, in the genuinely chaotic situation, that the calm they assumed they had is not available when the pressure is real. Daily discipline is the specific practice schedule that makes the calm-building training consistent, not the occasional dramatic exercise of the discipline in the face of the overwhelming challenge. The daily, unremarkable, brief application of the specific practices in the ordinary situations, the minor frustration that is regulated, the small decision that is made through the deliberate process rather than the automatic reactive output, the ordinary conversation that is engaged with the full listening practice, the brief moment of chaotic demand that is met with the deliberate slowing rather than the reactive acceleration. These are the daily practice sessions. The sessions accumulate into the capacity. Repetition is the mechanism through which the daily practice produces the trained calm. The neural infrastructure that supports the regulated, deliberate, organized cognitive functioning is built through the repetition of the specific practices. Each application of the breath regulation is a small increment of the physiological regulation capacity. Each application of the thinking framework is a small increment of the structured thinking habit. Each application of the attentional return to the genuine priority is a small increment of the attentional control capacity. The increments are individually tiny. The accumulated infrastructure of many repetitions is the specific architecture of the trained calm that this audiobook is building. Training the mind through the daily practice is the same process that training any capacity follows: the consistent demand on the capacity at the level that extends it without overwhelming it, followed by the recovery that allows the adaptation. The mind that is consistently demanded of the calm in the ordinary situations is building the capacity for the calm in the extraordinary ones. The mind that is only tested in the extraordinary situations without the daily training is discovering the limit of the untrained default in the worst possible context, the genuine chaotic demand, rather than in the training sessions that would have prepared it. Chapter 10. Becoming stable in any situation. When you are stable, chaos stops affecting you. The stability that this final chapter names is the destination of everything the preceding 9 chapters have been building: the specific cognitive and behavioral quality of the person whose thinking, observation, and decision-making does not significantly degrade in the chaotic conditions because the internal architecture that supports them has been built to be available regardless of what the external conditions are doing. The identity shift that the developed stability produces is the most important dimension of this destination. The person who has consistently practiced the slowing, the attentional control, the emotional regulation, the structured thinking, and the daily training across many situations over sufficient time is no longer the person who is trying to be calm in chaos. They are the person who is calm in chaos, who expresses the stability as the natural quality of the developed character rather than the effortful management of the developed goal. The identity has shifted. the quality is now the expression of who they are rather than the aspiration toward who they want to be. Calm as a baseline is the specific neurological and behavioral expression of the identity shift. The person who has built the calm through the consistent daily practice is no longer starting each chaotic situation from the activated, urgency-driven default that the untrained mind defaults to. They are starting from a regulated baseline, a physiological and cognitive starting point that is closer to the functional range and requires less regulatory resource to maintain there. The chaotic situation still produces the activation. The regulated baseline means the activation begins lower and requires less governance to return to the functional range. The calm is the starting point, not the destination to be reached through the regulatory effort. Long-term mastery of the discipline calm is the ongoing development that never reaches a final state. The capacity continues to deepen through continued application. The situations that once required the effortful regulatory practices now require less effort. The situations that were previously beyond the current capacity become the next training ground. The development is cumulative and progressive. The mastery is the direction, not the arrival. When you are stable, chaos stops affecting you. Not because the chaos becomes less chaotic, because the stability has become the primary determinant of the quality of your thinking rather than the external conditions. The chaos is present, the stability is present alongside it, and the stability governs the thinking rather than the chaos. Closing. The discipline that holds. 10 chapters, 1 discipline, built through practice. Not built through the single dramatic moment of the committed decision to be calmer. Built through the consistent application of the specific practices, the slowing, the attentional direction, the emotional regulation, the structured thinking, the daily training across the ordinary and the extraordinary situations that the genuinely engaged life continuously produces as training material. The chaos remains. It has always remained. The discipline is what changes. The discipline changes the relationship to the chaos from the relationship of the person who is being organized by the chaos to the relationship of the person who is thinking clearly through it. That is the transformation. That is what the 10 chapters have been building. The chaos will test the discipline. It is testing it now. In the ordinary demands of the ordinary day. Each test met with the practice is a training session. Each training session builds the architecture. The architecture is the calm mind that this audiobook has been developing. You are not waiting for calm. You are building it.